Welcome back to another game design video where we're talking about how to design a tabletop sports game. In this video, this is part 4, so if you haven't watched the other 3, it might be interesting to you, and you can find them in the playlist on this channel, or as a playlist. And so far we talked about, getting a theme, deciding on sort of what aspect of, well, the theme would be the sport. So choosing a sport, choosing what sort of aspect of the sport that you want to focus on. And then after you choose that aspect of the sport, thinking about, how detailed do you want this game to be? Do you want it to be a full-on simulation? Do you want it to just be about particular section of a play? So for instance, in baseball, do you want it to be just about fielding, or only about batting, only about pitching, or do you want it to be some combination of all those things? And then what is the combination? How much detail do you want to put into each of those? Do you want the main focus to be the pitcher and batter? And then there's sort of less detail with base running and fielding and stuff like that. Or do you want it to be detailed all the way through and be a hardcore simulation that just takes hours or days to sort of complete, because each play itself is taking into account every single thing that could be taken into account on a play. So that's kind of where we stand at this point. And that's sort of a lot of theory. And I showed some some basic role research this last time in part 3, and how sort of manipulating different parts of the of the advantage or disadvantage can sort of push things one way or the other into the favor of one player or one team as opposed to the other team, and then how little you have to do really to sort of affect that percentage. Okay, and this probably for the next foreseeable, unless I just have a one-off sort of video, we're gonna walk through an idea I have. I'm about to show you lots of ideas that I've had. Some of them have led to the game itself. Some of them have led to other games. And the ideation process is part of one of my favorite parts. So that's one of the best parts of creating the game is, okay, once I've decided what I want to do, once I've decided sort of the detail level and what I want to go toward in the final product, now I get to think about how do you get there. And man, there's so many ways to get there. And this is a new game. And I really I did an interview with Jeff Giordano with the APA Football Club. And we were talking about, sort of the future of games and where games are going and how that's going to sort of play out, especially with my generation and younger. Tabletop games, not just sports games, but tabletop. And one of the things that we talked about, and he's been talking about with others, is sort of bringing in more dynamic elements. Gameplay today is not particularly static, although if you play most sports games over the last 60 or 70 years, they're sort of static, statistic-based games where you roll dice based off of statistics, and you have choices in the game, but the game itself is not very dynamic. So the player is fixed, basically. And so I was thinking, well, what if the player is not fixed? What if, because you see this a lot in newer games, things change and move within the game, and they become dynamic within the game. Even when you play a Madden or you play an NBA game, NBA Live or whatever, it's driven by AI, the component or the opponent that you're playing against. And the AI is smart. You run the same play 4 times, they're going to start running the one play or the 2 plays that they know is going to stop that play. So you can't just keep pounding the ball. That's Madden 93. That's what you used to be able to do back in the day. You just, you play Super Tecmo Bowl, you get Bo Jackson, you pitch it out to the left and watch him go, right? So it's not like that anymore. The opponent is smart. The opponent is dynamic. The opponent is watching what you do, and if you continue to do those things over and over, the opponent will choose a play that's going to stop you. Okay. So even using the cheating AI, right? You're running. I have faced that today playing Madden. the running back for the Raiders, just the first guy never brought him down. I'm on the All Madden, and the first guy never brought him down. And playing with Minnesota, not the greatest defensive backfield in the league, but you certainly don't expect Jacobs every time to throw someone to the ground with a stiff arm or grab them and throw them to the ground. But that was happening, and I lost the game. So it's once you get into the upper levels, they kind of have to cheat in order to do those kinds of things where they have superhuman players and things like that. So, um, there is some cheating that goes up with leveling. We call it cheating, but they would say it's just making it more difficult for the human player. Anyway, that's a tangent, but the idea is that there's dynamism inside of the game. The game is changing as you play the game. As you make choices, the game and the players are changing. Their skill levels, their abilities, the outcomes. So, what if we brought a little bit of that to baseball? So, I've had this idea for a long time about it was just kind of a general concept. What if we had baseball players who could sort of go up and down or fluctuate throughout the game? And not necessarily, um, not necessarily. So, Kurt Roberts has a baseball game that he created for the digital side for the web, where every at bat is different and it's based upon the at bat before. Similar to that, but a little bit more of a game than and you get to make more decisions about what gets applied and when and how that can be applied, and there's some limitations. So a little bit more game like than doing something like that sort of automatically happens in the background, which is very cool. By the way, I love that Kurt did that because it just happens and you won't even notice it unless you're really paying attention or he's told you, hey, this at bat has changed because of the previous at bat. So I love that. I love the subtlety of it. I love that it happens automatically the player, but again, the player doesn't have any sort of choices about what mm, how that batter sort of changes or how that pitcher changes or how that fielder changes. So that's what I want to bring in to the game. And so I started to think about that and I started writing down. This is how I usually write my notes. I just have a Google Docs document that I use. I've started using Google Docs. I'll also show you my sketchbook. As a designer, I have a sketchbook. So this is sort of not new territory for me. I've been doing that for a long time. But this is just applying it to game design. But here I've got some ideas that I sort of wrote down, and the core of the game is here in the top section of it, and I'll explain it in just a minute. But basically, I write down, some people call it a design brief, some people call it a game brief, or whatever. It's basically, what is the game about? Sort of what's the elevator speech of the game? Like if someone said, "Hey, you're working on a new game," and say, "Yeah," and they said, "Tell me about it." And you got 15 seconds to sort of tell them what's the core of the game, what makes it different, what's the heart of the game, what makes it special. So sort of writing down those things so that you have them in your mind, because that's your vision. That's your sort of overall vision for the game. For mine, I have it here that I want to create a game that has dynamic in-game elements that make um, each game unique and different. So you're not playing, even though you play with the same players, you're not going to have the same game every single time. This is baseball, right? It's so seemingly random sometimes. The game follows a sort of risk-inspired model of getting turn cards and turning those in as rewards. And then there's also a sort of risk style multi-dice rolling system that determines the outcome, or at least it determines the advantage for each play. Each turn players can get turn cards that they can then turn in 3 cards at a time to get a skill card. So sort of like in Risk, where you get cards each turn, and then you can eventually turn those in. If you have a set, you can turn those in, and you can get more guys for your army, right? More pieces to put down on the thing. So skill cards give a skill boost for players on the field, and they can be used only as directed on the card. So each card is going to tell you, this is good for one inning and has to be used within one inning of getting the card, or this has to be used sometime during the game and it's only good for 2 innings or something like that. So you'll have that boost, that special skill, that advantage on the roll, whatever it is. You're going to have that for 2 innings, and you apply that to whatever player you want to apply it to. Obviously, for things like strikeouts, you're going to want to apply that to either the batter or the pitcher. But there are other cards that hopefully I'll come up with, and I don't have everything sort of in stone yet, but I have a good idea of where to go. Skill cards are laid out 3 at a time from a skill deck. So the deck will be sitting here, and then you have 3 cards laid out face up. And then those are the cards that can be chosen. That can be chosen from. So when you get the 3 turn cards, you turn them in for a skill card. You can only choose from the 3 face up cards. So there's a little bit of a limitation about what you can do, but it's not totally random where you only get one choice. You have 3 choices that have been randomly laid on the table. So you can choose, do I want to focus more on strikeouts? Do I want to focus more on a hitting card or an error card, or, what, based on the game situation, based on where we are, I have a few choices about the direction I want to take this game. So that's sort of the idea there. And 3 seems right. 3 is a baseball number, right? There's lots of 3s. If a player has 6 turn cards, then he has to turn at least 3. So you can't just keep hoarding turn cards. You got to, once you have 6, you got to turn them in. I think it's like that in Risk too. Like, once you have 6 or something like that, you have to turn them in for an army. If the skill card's not used within the time limit, then it has to be discarded. So if you only have 2 innings to use it, or you only have 1 inning that you can use it, or it has to be used the next inning and you don't use it, then it has to be discarded. And then basically you put it to the bottom of the pile. Once a skill card's chosen from the pool, so we have our 3 and you take 1, then you take 1 off the top and you put it and replace it. So there should always be 3 face up in the game. It should be replenished each time 1 is taken. And so the reason for Risk is a couple things. First, I was thinking, like, what's a game mechanic that's sort of out of the ordinary that you could bring in? It's dice, yeah, and it's cards, yeah, but this is a little different than most baseball games, right? Most baseball games, the cards are the players, the dice determine the results, and then the player outcomes have all been sort of predetermined based upon that player's skill level, stats, whatever has been determined to be his value or whatever. So it sort of lives within this fixed universe of replay. And I've been thinking about this a little bit too. There's sort of a difference between baseball replay and baseball simulation. Now, a lot of replay games get called simulations just because they have all the components of baseball. However, to truly simulate baseball, you only should be able to provide the environment that allows for a baseball game to happen. But in a replay, you're restricting that environment to these fixed players, so that if you play with Steve Carlton, he pitches 100 times, he's going to come in pretty close to what his numbers are in real life for that season or his career or whatever you've chosen. But in a simulation, you should be able to insert anyone into that. And I don't know that that's possible with a replay. So a replay to me is a little bit different. On-base baseball is a replay, right? You do get to make some choices, but those choices are bound by the players already. They're bound by the players inside that universe. And maybe this is everything. I'm not sure. I'm still thinking about this idea because, you put fictional players out there. They have to be bound by something. But there's a sense at which you should be able to throw generic players out there and they should be able to play. Okay, so for some replays, I don't know that that's true. Sometimes I think games are built toward built toward certain things, but I don't really, again, that's sort of just an idea I've been thinking through. You could disagree in the comments if you want to. I'm halfway disagreeing with myself right now as I talk about it, so it's okay. Anyway, so what I want to do is I want to create this baseball universe where the on-field play is dynamic. And there are games where, say, you determine the pitcher's ability um, while they are warming up in the bullpen, right? So you roll your dice. Does he have his A stuff, or is he just average today, or whatever? So that's an instance of sort of like uh, input variability. You're sort of given this new input at the beginning of the game that doesn't exist on the card. Now he's rated for those things. He's rated if he's this way or that way or that way. But you don't actually know. There's some randomness before the game starts of what the pitcher's going to do, right? And that's totally based upon a random roll. It's not based upon the opponent. It's not based upon anything else. It's just a totally random roll of dice. What if your pitcher is an average pitcher every single time that he starts? That's a possibility. Not a probability, but a possibility. And so now you have an average pitcher who won the Cy Young, but he's average every time he starts. Or vice versa, an average or bad pitcher who becomes better and all of a sudden wins the Cy Young, but he had a 5.60 ERA in real life. So there's a little bit of randomness that kind of knocks everything out of keel, and could, but probably doesn't each time. But it could. And so that's sort of the point. So what I want is more user-directed dynamism within the game, not game player, not player on the field. So I'm going to use gamer for the people playing the game, and I'm going to use player for the actual players, baseball players on the field that you're manipulating or using. So stick with me on this. It's dynamism. It's dynamic elements within the game based upon what happens in the game, but directed by the gamer, each gamer on each side. And I anticipate this being a really good two-player game, just because each person is going to be able to sort of battle roll like you would in Risk. Risk is a good mano-a-mano type game because each of you is rolling the dice, right? So, and then you have to both compare the dice and see how that goes. So this is like it's just an interesting idea at this point. It's an idea that I've tested, one time. But that's the core, that's the guts of the game. And I have that all written down here. I have what does the battle sequence look like? So how many dice do the pitcher get to roll? If he's an A pitcher, he gets more dice. If he's a B or C, he gets one. At this point, I'm using 2 and 1 because there needs to be some flexibility there to go up or down based on skill cards, right? So you got to leave a little bit of padding, I guess, so that the players can move up and down a rating. And I'm using just a generic ABC rating based off of other ratings that I've used in the past, ABC, maybe even a D for pitchers or really bad hitters like Mark Belanger. He's a terrible hitter, great fielder, but a terrible hitter. And then for the hitter, if he's an A hitter, gets 2 dice. If he's a B or C hitter, which would be average or below average, then only gets to roll 1 dice. And this is on sort of what I've called the confrontation roll in other games, but this is basically the pitcher against the batter to determine who gets to determine the outcome of the play. So each player rolls the dice, sort of like Risk, and the highest dice roll wins. So the winner of the roll then takes 2 dice and rolls to get to the outcome. And then I have just what would be a pitcher outcome win, so to speak, a win, a strikeout, a fly ball, a fly out, a ground out. Those are wins, a foul out. So those are wins for a pitcher, getting an out, right? Getting on base safely would be a win for the batter. So that would be single, double, triple, home run, a walk, a hit by pitch, an error, I was, excuse me. I was thinking about something else. I can't remember what else I was thinking about, but um, so after each turn, whoever wins the at bat receives one turn card. So after each at bat, whoever wins that at bat, that team receives one turn card. So it's sort of like in Risk, where it doesn't matter. Uh, after you do a turn, you get turn cards, right? So it gives you an opportunity later on to turn them in. Turn cards can be combined and traded in to get skill cards, and then skill cards increase or decrease player skills in these areas: home runs, strikeouts, errors, steals, pickoffs, and clutch situations. So it's sort of you can apply this to the batter in this clutch situation type of thing. And so I went through and I just talked about, how each of those skills might change or manipulate the player's opportunity. Talked about, how would you do a pickoff, and what would it mean to steal bases. This came in this morning. So after I played one game, I realized uh, the pitchers, it was Doc Gooden and Randy Johnson, not exactly like the greatest hitting pitchers in the world, but they went 2 for 7 with a double and 2 singles. So probably not going to happen in a game, but I haven't adjusted the odds so that that won't happen. So realistically, that might happen. Or they might go for 4 for 4 because they're not distinctly different than, let's say, a C position player. Okay, so I needed to create some difference there. So I was thinking about that this morning. I thought, well, if the pitcher had 3 dice and the batting pitcher only had 1 die, then that would create sufficient advantage. Because before it was only a 2 to 1, so 3 to 1 gives you three chances to defeat that 1 die. And then for a sacrifice bunt, what would that look like? The bunter gets 1 extra die. So theoretically, it's probably a B or a C player who's going to be bunting. You're probably not going to be bunting with Albert Pujols or Sammy Sosa or Roger Maris or Babe Ruth, who are all going to be A players. So you're probably not bunting with those people. So a B or a C would get an extra die, and then that would be 2 to 2. They would need to only win one of those rolls, which normally the batter has to win. If he has 2 dice, he has to win both rolls in order to get a hit. So still thinking through those odds and things like that too. So I think I'm going to move the pitcher to 3 dice if he's an A player, and 2 dice if he's not. Just trying to, this is part of the gameplay process. The testing process is to figure out, okay, if I change this variable, how does that affect the gameplay? And if I don't change it, how does that affect the gameplay? Or if I move it back closer, make them closer, how does that affect the gameplay? So that's where I am with the game. This is sort of the core and the guts of the game. I haven't even started to work on the turn cards or the skill cards because the baseball part has to work. So I talked about that in part number 2, how the core of the game has to work first. And then the features that you add to the game need to be able to move inside of that sort of core game. But if you're playing baseball and you want to simulate the entire game and have all the components like base running and fielding and bunting and stuff like that, then you're going to need all of those components to work with your core game mechanic. And the core game mechanic here is the sort of Risk style dice roll. I can always add in the turn cards. That's not difficult necessarily, because then you just manipulate the core mechanic with whatever the skill cards are. So that's not a difficult thing to add in. But what I need is for the core game mechanic to work. So that's really the key to the game, and it's got to look and feel like baseball. It's got to be relatively within the realm of baseball, even if you skew it toward pitching or you skew it toward hitting or you skew it toward home runs or whatever. That's a choice that you get to make as a player. So let me show you the cards that I came up with. Let's see if I can find them. So basically, I'm just using D6 dice. Okay. So this is sort of the roadmap that I have. I've created these little blank uh, cardstock cards, just cut them out, and used real playing cards to create the size, and then just cut them out by hand. This is what I came up with. So here we have the Mets, Doc Gooden. We have the Diamondbacks. We have Randy Johnson. So it's 2002. I was trying to think about pitchers, pitchers to feature, because that's really going to be the thing, at least to start off with. And so we have, let's see that better here. So what we have are sort of the main components to play the game. So I created 2 pitcher cards. They each have an A rating. So remember, ABC is our sort of rating system at this point. And then I created a starting lineup based upon the actual starting lineups, the most starting lineups for each team. The 85 Mets and the 2002 Diamondbacks. And I chose these seasons based upon these 2 players. So this was Gooden's best season. This was Randy Johnson's best season. And then this is a hitter's chart. So I had a pitcher chart down here. I've erased it because I want to do something more. But basically, there's a strikeout, a flyout, a ground out, right? And then I had that on a D1, 1 to 100 scale. And then just broke up each of those things based on like their strikeout percentages, and then sort of guessed on flyouts and groundouts for each of them. But for hitters, if the hitter wins the role, then they need some chart, right? Hopefully you can see that pretty well. Shine a little light on it. And then this chart here is for an A, B, or C batter, and then you roll again off a D100. So whoever wins the roll rolls 1 to 100 again, and then that roll it shows an outcome, and then that's the outcome of the play. So this is sort of the baseline, base level game play. But you can see that all this is just done with pencil on paper. This is not probably what the cards are going to look like in the end, although this is sort of my vision and idea. And, 6 times out of 10, it's going to look something like this, because that's sort of where I'm envisioning. But I also have to think about, what else do I need to add to the cards, especially for leveling people up? Do I need little places for markers to say, hey, okay, he's got a K advantage, or he's got a home run advantage until whatever is finished, right? Or does that need to be placed on the game board itself so that every player comes up has a home run advantage? So, or do we want to apply it only to one particular player? Okay, so that's sort of how that goes. So I've gone through and I've rated each of these players in the field. We have all 8 players, and then we have the pitchers. And the pitchers, I just rated a C as a batter, but again, I showed you I should probably rate them as a D, and that would be a D gets a special, +1 to the pitcher, a +1 die to the pitcher. And so this is sort of the simple gameplay, and then you would play, Randy Johnson against here, and then, you would play Dwight Gooden against here, and then you sort of have your your players here. So this would be sort of the footprint. I did go ahead and fill out a scorecard, and so this is just the on-base scorecard. You can see that the Mets won 2-0. They scored 2 here in the 4th inning. They got a single from Hojo. They got another single from Santana, the shortstop, and then there was a double from Doc Gooden, knocked in a run, and then a single from Mookie Wilson, knocked in the 2nd run. And then they did load the bases, but then Randy Johnson struck out 3 batters in a row, 2 in 1 inning and then 1 in the next. So basically, you're thinking about 3 dice for the pitcher side and 2 dice for the hitter side. And so you've got a this is sort of the basic setup here. And I wound up, being able to play an entire game. So that was no issue to be able to play an entire game, which is sort of I want to be able to get the game to that place. Can I play a full 9 inning game and get it sort of through? Can I get it finished? That tells me that the core game works if I've been able to play an entire game. Now, I don't have any pitching changes, no stamina, no anything like that. So Johnson went 9 innings, gave up 9 hits and 2 runs, 7 Ks, 3 walks. Gooden 9 innings, 10 hits, 6 Ks, and 1 walk. So, it's believable at this point. So we have a core game. We have a game that can be played. Now it's trying to figure out and manipulate a little bit of the detail. Can these what to do with the dice, how to get the game into maybe a better place, something to think about. So he's an A pitcher. He would get 3. Let's say who was up, let's say he's facing off against Mookie Wilson. Wilson is a B batter, right? So he would only have 1 die. So essentially this would be 3 against 1, and you roll. Can you see those dice? I don't know if you can see them. Get them on the camera there. So basically you roll, you've got a 6-3-1. I've been putting them like this because it's easier to see. So you got like a 6-3-1 against a 2. And so the highest number obviously beats him. And then now you would roll. I've been rolling 2 D10s. You need 1 D10 to be the first number and 1 to be the second. And so you would roll, and that would be a 93. So he's the black number first. And then the 93 for Randy Johnson I was using as a fly ball. So it's basically like 65 to 100 would be a fly ball. 1 to 32, I think, was his K percentage. And then 33 to 64 would have been his ground out percentage. So that would be a fly ball out for Mookie Wilson. And then the next batter up was Wally Backman. Backman was a C. Where's he at? He's a C batter. So again, you get, I was only playing with 2 at the time. So it's, 2 against 1. And Backman, another 2. So his, that's another pitcher win. You got to remember, it's going to seem like a lot of pitcher wins, but pitchers win a lot in baseball. And then that would be a 33. That would be a ground out for Wally Backman. Then the third batter was Darryl Strawberry. Strawberry is an A player. So as I have it written down, this is an A situation where Strawberry as an A batter has 2 opportunities. Randy Johnson has 2 opportunities, but the batter has to win them both in order to get a hit, because eventually if they get a hit, it's an automatic getting on base. This is not rolling for a hit. So it's I'm not looking for who has the advantage. A 50-50 roll could do that just as well. What I'm looking for is an almost your 2-in outcome, basically when the person wins. So it has to be a little bit more realistic in this roll. So Randy Johnson, this would not be a great roll. There's an opportunity here still for Darryl Strawberry, but he doesn't win, right? So he doesn't win either roll. And I played that the tie goes to the pitcher. Okay, so I want more defense and pitching in the game, and then that would be a 46. That would be a ground out, and so that's 3 outs in the inning. And so that's sort of a sample gameplay, and then you just keep going through your lineup. You can see here. So Wilson's a B, a C, an A, an A, an A. So I have 3 A players right in a row. Foster's a B, Johnson's a C, C, and then Gooden in the new rules will be a D. Finley's an A, Council's a C, Gonzalez an A, Spivey an A, Grace is a C, Miller is a B, McCracken a B, Womack a C, and then Johnson would be a D under the new rules. And so for the pitcher, if you're going up against Doc Gooden, this would be the roll, and it would be, 3 against 1. That's a great roll here. and it's going to be, he has to roll a 6, but he still wins, right? So it is possible for the pitcher to take that win and to win the roll. So it's just not probable that that's going to happen. And then the batter would roll, a 13, and a C13 at this point would be a single, right? So, and then I've graded out these players. So 16 to 59 is a single, 12 to 69 is a single, 12 to 79 is a single, and then they've got sort of a sliding scale of being able to hit a single or triple or home run, and only a 99 or 100 for a C player is going to be a home run. So it's going to be just like a 2% chance each time that they get an opportunity, but it's not 2% of their at bats, so or 2% of plate appearances or anything like that. Just 2% of the chances that they get a chance to hit, which these probably have to be changed and manipulated a little bit over time. So that's sort of the basics of the game. You can see that some of the core things I've done is I created a plan and a vision, put that on paper, and then I started building a few just basic components to do the basic game. And then I played the basic game once. So just testing to see, are the guesses that I made close? Do they need to be changed? Do we need to start getting rid of these and then start rolling just 2d6 dice, which I'm thinking about, which would cut down on the number of components. So instead of all this, you would be sort of left with this. So you would get rid of d10 components. It's a little bit easier to find d6 dice than d10, although most gamers probably have at least a couple of d10s around. And then, so these will be your components, right? You would have 3, you would have 2 for the offense. It's generally more difficult for the offense in baseball. So you want to have sort of 3 against 2, sort of flipped in risk. Risk, you have 3 for the offense, 2 for the defense. So it's a little bit different. And then after that, for each, we're looking at Randy Johnson here. So he had a K. For a K, you would get a turn card. So that would be sort of a special event that happened. If there was a home run hit, that would be a turn card. If you had an RBI, that would be a turn card. And then for each inning, you would also get a turn card. So in this first inning, the Diamondbacks would have gotten 2 turn cards. You need 3 in order to trade that in for a special skill that you can use throughout the game. So it's, every team is guaranteed 7, 8 turn cards. I guess 8 turn cards that they can use throughout the game. Ideally, you want to have, more than that. You're going to have more because they're going to be strikeouts or home runs or special plays. And then, that's my original thought. Is that going to happen? I don't know. Will that be in the official, release of the game? I don't know. Who knows, at this point. And then the last thing I wanted to show is just sort of my process. So I'm walking you through the process as part of this game, and we'll continue to flesh out this game and see what it looks like to test it, what it looks like to take it. So you've seen the concept, and can we take that concept to another level? But just to let you know, these are early conceptual drawings and stats and things like that for different parts of the game. This was for On Base Advanced. And so my original thought for the fielding was something like this. And I'll just continue to try to work it like that over and over. And it just never worked out, honestly. And then I got around a little bit more to what it looks like now, which is like this. This was sort of the original thought of the matrix. And then you can see I did some actual research on how many fly balls go to each player. And, I just did a little bit of research through actual numbers online so that I could make the grids big enough. You can see here that the center fielder gets more balls, so he should have more zones. Same thing here. Basically, you're hitting the ball this way. And then, each player here The catcher doesn't get as many fly balls as the shortstop or the second baseman, same for the first and third baseman. So I'm just trying to get proportions right so that whenever you play the game, it feels like, okay, the third baseman is getting about the average number of fly balls. This is also, I can see with the O swing and the Z swing, this is also working out, sort of starting to work out the actual numbers. And are these numbers going to work? Like if I use these numbers, these values of outside the zone swings and inside the zone swings, are they going to come out to relatively realistic outcomes? You can see here that um, I don't know how many I did here, probably 50 or 100 or something like that. And, 13 out of 58 was the batting average. How many Ks did I come up with? How many walks? And so I'm just trying to work out, are these numbers, are these values going to be good values to use? I want to know that early. Because if I design the game and do all that and the values are not good, I've just wasted a lot of time, energy, effort. So that's the point of using pen and paper. For here, this is a totally different game. This was based off of using a deck of cards. But you can see here that what you did to start the inning was to draw a situation card to start the inning. And then you set the situation on the board, you play a manager card, and then you flip the cards for the play. Now, this is actually the beginnings of Tabletop Manager Baseball, which is still sort of in development and kind of taking a break on that one for a while. But you can play it. I can put a link in the description, or you can hit me up if you want that link. It's out there to play, and it's actually quite fun to play. So then you have sort of, you draw, you flip the cards, and then each one does something different, different kinds of cards. So you have sort of rare plays with jokers, and I've outlined some of the situations here, possible situations, and then what happens if you bring the infield in. So this is sort of the outline for Tabletop Manager. Now I don't use the deck of cards anymore. I have a few charts, 5 charts actually, that I use to determine what happens on the play, and that's based off of player, again, ABCD ratings. You can see here I was testing out, if you pull a certain card in a certain color, certain thing happens, right? So that was sort of what I was thinking. And then this actually is the beginning of, if you take the situation cards and you take the deck of cards, you've got quick play baseball. Okay, so I'm showing you this because write down your ideas and keep them, because they're going to lead to other ideas. And maybe you've put them all together here, but you need to separate out some of those ideas, and they will actually be a part of a different game. Maybe it's a mechanic that doesn't work here. Obviously, I've decided that this deck of cards doesn't work for Tabletop Manager. I needed something different. So, but I pulled out the situation cards and the deck of cards, and that became a whole new game that's in production. You can buy it today, that people actually really enjoy playing. This is not this part here, but this is for the drive-by-drive football game. So first you have a pass, run, or a penalty. And then this is a game that I started. I don't know if I have that over here or not. I had a lot of stops and starts on the football side. I don't think I have that here around me. But it was a football game that mimicked quick play, or not quick play, but up-tempo basketball. So similar to that. So that was a little bit of a concept. This one here. Okay, here's the full tabletop. This is a different version, sort of a version 2 of Tabletop Baseball Manager that has not been talked about or released or anything like that. I've just been thinking about changing the game somewhat to be a lot more on the manager's side and less on the player's side. So you have third base coaches, you have pitching coaches, you have hitting coaches, and so they have different traits and things like that. And this is something that maybe we could even lay on top of a another game, another tabletop baseball game. So it's like a manager coach layer that you can just sort of port into any game. And based upon these things, people have, you can manipulate and change the outcomes. So if you have a hitting coach um, whose focus is power, then the risk is that you get more Ks, more strikeouts, but the reward is that you get more home runs and doubles, more extra base hits. If you have a batting coach who is stressing patience, then you get more Ks but fewer walks, or more Ks but more walks, right? So if you're patient, you're not swinging, but you're also letting borderline pitches go by. So you're going to get more strikeouts, ironically, but you're also going to get more walks because you're not swinging at pitches outside the zone. And then a contact hitting coach would cause your players to have fewer home runs and doubles, so fewer extra base hits, but also fewer Ks. So you would strike out less. So that's sort of the concept there. So that's, you can see I always date it. So this is April. I was getting ready for the baseball season. This is a game called Flip Top Baseball. And this actually, what I showed you today has its grounding here. This also has its grounding in the No Huddle Football. So very similar, just sort of a confrontation role. And depending on the outcome of that confrontation role, then there's an action role or an outcome roll where you roll to find the outcome of the play. So this is almost exactly what I used in No Huddle. So that's useful as a game mechanic. This one's called Card Flip Baseball. Flip a card for the at bat to start. You can swing or take based upon what's on the card, and then you roll the dice to see the outcome. So this is sort of if you see some of these things, it's very similar to what I did with what's it called? Dog Days Baseball. So it's very similar to what's happening in Dog Days Baseball. You have a count, or you have a card where you have to sort of make a decision. There are outs, there are hits. So you'll see Dog Days Baseball in this, but we have a count. You want to swing, you want to take. You can automate the swing take process. And so that one. And I'm just I'm using my notebook here. This is for a football game. I was really working through football a lot. And so this was the roll for run pass penalty, and then you flip a card. You have sort of offense and defense, each with a card. So you put them face down, you flip them up. There's another card, it's called NFL Showdown or something like that, some sort of game where you flip your cards and you put them together and it shows you the play, which I think is a really clever gameplay mechanic, is really awesome. But the game is kind of dinky. So I was thinking through that sort of situation here. Could we do that for a hardcore football game? And then thinking through the different offenses and thinking through the different defenses, sort of base defenses, and then how can we use an offense picking a play, a defense picking a play, and then working that out so that you have sort of zones in here, a la 4th Street Football. It's very similar to 4th Street Football. I went ahead and made a whole series of plays, and I went through the gamut with this one because I thought it was a really good idea, and never really showed anybody any of this, but this will be sort of a nickel defense with a linebacker blitz, and then there would be you would have to roll here to resolve this blitz. Did he get it picked up or not? And if he got it picked up, then you can continue the play. If he didn't, then there was something that happened in order to, and this was the card for that. So if they didn't pick up the blitz, then you roll for its linebacker 2. So then you roll against linebacker 2, and then whatever happens here is sort of the effect of the play, because there was a defensive blitz that didn't get picked up. But if it did get picked up, then you do something else. You had uh, modifiers for a pass play, modifiers for a rush play that you sort of add to the offense or the defense. You're deciding which players, what happens whenever the player gets the ball. You're rolling. Here would be the running back 1. So you would roll for Devin Singletary on an offensive rush. So this is something that happens short, medium, or explosive play, and then you determine the yards. So that was the one of the initial concepts. And then each, offense and defense, you would have these and you put them down and then you flip them. So it's sort of a blind sort of thing that you get to do that. And so here's sort of like what I showed you on the Google Docs. You got your vision for the game. Flip the cards, flip the play cards, roll for the confrontation, which is what I did in No Huddle, right? This is very, very similar. And then you roll for the result. That's the exact same gameplay. It's just this one is way more complex and way more convoluted in some ways. And so then we had to think about how to rate and deal with each of these different things. So offensive line ratings, what do I use in order to create a +1 type situation? That's this, trying to create this chart here. So how do I come up with the team modifiers? What do I use in order to do those team modifiers? How do I get this offense and defense rating? And this is just based off of actual statistics for passes. So Devin Singletary had an 80% completion percentage based off of his targets. Okay, so, and then there's an incompletion, and then he had, a handful of fumbles. And I did the fumble percentage. I didn't do the actual number of fumbles, just the fumble percentage. So if they didn't have any fumbles, they don't get the opportunity to do that. But obviously, you could just make that all 1% and an opportunity there. But all the way down to the wide receiver 4, running back 2, tight end. So that's actually different, I think, for each team. This was another team I did, the 49ers. Yeah, so they had more. They only had the 3 wide receivers. They had 2 tight ends. They had the fullback. And so they had a few different types of players. But as far as defensive players, these are your ones that played the most. This is before I added the defensive line. This is an earlier version because I added the defensive lineman as well at some point. So this is, the beginnings of a game. It's actually quite far along, and I'm kind of stuck with it, and it's not very fun. So not very fun to me, but maybe it would be fun to you. I'm not sure. If you would like me to pursue that game, just put it in the comment section, because I feel a little lost with that one. No Huddle came a little bit easier because it came out of that game and it was a little quicker. There wasn't so much detail, but I love football. I love the strategy of football, but man, football is hard to do because there are so many moving parts and they all happen at the exact same time. So it's almost like you have to do sort of a slow motion kind of look. So the play starts and then you have a game state at the start of a play. You take one step and then you have the initial play state, and then they take 2 steps and then you have another play state, and then you have a result or an outcome. So it almost has to be so slow, but then you've got 22 players who all have to interact and mingle with each other. And that's, part of the reason that taking a football game, playing a football game takes forever, is because you're trying to sort of show all of those different game states, but also the player states within those, because there's a lot of confrontations happening. So hopefully this wasn't too much of a ramble. Hopefully it shows you process. This is the process that goes into designing or creating anything. If you've ever made something, you know that it looks very similar to this. And I encourage you to have some sort of a notebook or a sketchbook that when you have an idea and you're sitting there watching TV, you can just grab it, write it down, think about it for a minute, and then come back to it. Um, Maybe it's an idea that doesn't get implemented now. Maybe when you're thinking about something in the future, you remember. You're like, oh, well, that's a gameplay mechanic that will work for this, even though I wasn't necessarily thinking that way. I've already actually written that out and thought about it. Or maybe it doesn't work here. I've tried it, and maybe I can bust it out into something different. Um, so, but this game here is the game that we'll pursue. And I'll use this game as a way to just sort of show you how to go about doing all the different components. Some of it's going to be like how to make cards, um, what to decide, why did I make the decisions I made for these different cards. And we'll talk about that a little bit more as it goes along, and you'll see these cards become more mm, set in stone, um, better looking, that kind of thing, as opposed to just right now, it's just really quickly, these are the values I need in order to play this game. This is generally what I would want it to look like. Does it work if it's a grid like this, or does it need to be portrayed some other way? Do each of these players need a card? Does that make it easier, or does it make it okay just to have, your basics here with maybe a batting number and a fielding number, or a batting and speed, or something like that? So those are all decisions that have to be made later on. Right now, I'm just focusing on what's the core gameplay. How many dice do you need? How do you do the setup? Um, if I were to give these instructions to somebody, or if I were to show them on a video, could they take these components and play a game themselves and feel like when you got to the end that you had a satisfactory game? So this feels like a real baseball game, that if Doc Gooden and Randy Johnson pitched against each other and these two teams played against each other, this feels like what would happen. You got a 2-for-5 game for Mookie Wilson. Nobody went 5-for-5 or anything like that. Strawberry 1-for-2. It's a good number of strikeouts. McCracken 2-for-4. Now the pitchers were the only outliers, right? The pitchers went a combined 3-for-7, which is a whatever 400 batting average. So that's a little out of whack. And so I would look at that immediately and say, okay, there's something I need to do something different for pitchers, which is what I did. And they should not be able to have that sort of advantage. They shouldn't be hitting 300. Um, if it happens, it happens, but it shouldn't be a norm. And I can see that if I continue to do it like this, then that's going to be, there's no way for me to change that or make that different. Um, so just thinking through a little bit more of the detail of the gameplay at this point, and then how that's going to affect, will that affect the cards? Do I need to show or visually portray the game a little bit differently? Do I need to use different kinds of dice? Go back and forth sometimes on D6, D10. Do I need to use a D8 instead? So there's lots of different things to make decisions upon. But this has been designing a tabletop sports game, focusing on baseball in this one. So that's why it's on the On Base YouTube channel. But it works. I showed you the designs for football too, right? So this works for any game. It doesn't really matter. And I don't think I have the any of the up tempo sort of things that I went through. I think I had a really clear vision and idea for what up tempo basketball would be. So I probably started on the computer with that. Sometimes you just have clarity of thought and you can get right into creating the game. But here it's a little bit different. I don't know exactly how this risk style mechanic is going to work. So I really want to not get too far into the weeds if I need to kill it and go a different direction. But at least I know, and I haven't spent a lot of time and effort and money or printer ink or anything like that. I've just, just eraser and pencil. That's all I have. And then at whatever time it takes to cut out a few pieces of stock, card stock. So, all right. If you have any questions or comments, leave them down in the comments section below. I'd be happy to take your criticism or your praise, either one. I'm just trying to show you what it's like for me to make a game and sort of what that process is, because a lot of times you only see the final product, you don't see the development of the product. So maybe this is helpful. And if this game comes to fruition, it will be a very cool sort of documentary about how it came to be. Literally, this idea just came to me a couple of days ago. So I thought, okay, this is an opportunity to show the process, not just to talk through the process. So let's do that together. And if you have any ideas, you just put them in the comments section and let me know. And we can use this as a forum to create the game as well. I love that part, the collaborative effort with people who are looking at it from a particular perspective and saying, hey, I think this will make your game better, or have you thought about this? Or you could pull from this game and put that mechanic in there, or this would be a really cool thing to add. And then as we try it, maybe it becomes too cumbersome. Maybe it doesn't fit the vision. That's a choice that you make as a designer. You know, are people's suggestions in line with the vision of the game? Or are they trying to make it into this other game that they played that they just wish was a little bit different? That's definitely something you have to pay attention to as you have people speak into your game. So if you believe in the vision and their comments, their suggestions don't fit the vision, I would suggest trying it first. And then if it just doesn't fit, then cut it out and say, thank you. You know, thank you for your suggestion. I tried it and it doesn't work. So, but don't feel like everything that people say you have to sort of shoehorn and make work. But some things that people say are going to change your game. So listen to everybody. It doesn't matter. Okay. If you haven't subscribed to the channel, please subscribe. You can also get this playlist. Like I said, this is part 4 out of however many it takes to do this. And the others talk about some more high level concepts about starting the game or what to think about as you start thinking about creating a tabletop sports game. Hopefully, in the future, we get less clones and we get more unique games, whether it's a Euro style game or it's a mixture of sort of the old and the new, or it's just something really off the wall. Doesn't matter. If we push the boundaries of what it means to play tabletop sports, I think there's some new and interesting and very unique ideas will come out. Hopefully, this is one of them. And if you're excited about it, we'd love to hear that as well. If you're not, if you think it's goofy and dumb, then maybe just stick around and see if it becomes something a little bit more to your liking. We'll see. This is supposed to be a sort of a meld of the old and the new. So let's see if that happens. Okay, if you click subscribe and then you click the icon, the bell icon, you'll get notified of new videos whenever I post them. Probably not doing a lot of new baseball videos, so this will be kind of what is on this channel for a little bit as baseball winds down. And all right, I think that's it for me. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you again next time.